So the OA now does 15-year stakes, and at the time I wrote this, it was 90% of EHEX and PHEX. Now it's at 95% of HEX is staked from the OA. So we are seeing this is an interesting thing. Like I don't think a lot of people were speculating something like this could happen. And obviously, our friend Dip Catcher for a long time has been talking about how HEX has an inflation problem and the inflation is too high. It's apparently somebody agreed with him, and that's what we've seen as a result of this, which is really interesting. And again, there's been a lot of things people have speculated about that may or may not happen by people that want this ecosystem to do well. And I didn't really see this get brought up very much, as like a trick up the sleeve of anybody to make T-shares much more rare, much more scarce. We're seeing, the current rates, and it may have it right there. I mean, like the payout per T-share has gone down to what, like 2 HEX? And we were making what, 7 or 8, maybe, I want to say, before all this started. So yeah, well, we've seen that come way down, and I have so many points on this, but just to get your your take on it right away, Ewok. So it wasn't just 15-year stakes. That's what at first it was just like these big short-term stakes. We saw like week-long gigantic stakes. Then all of a sudden, tons of 5.555s start coming in. Stakes tapered all kinds of lengths, and just killing the supply of T-shares and HEX for people, that it's going to be harder to get your T-shares and to get your yield. And it's interesting, and we'll get to this too, but there's people that have differing views of this. I mean, like overall, I think the view should be positive that it is more scarce, and usually that helps make price go up. But some people are like, well, now I'm not getting long-term HEX yield. So what do you make of, first off, just the idea of the OA to do this? Because it's not something I saw coming.
There's a couple things that you could kind of think about. The first one that I thought was, well, there goes the big argument against HEX, is that the OA could always dump on my head. Well, not anymore. That's a huge one. It's locked up there, and at least not for 7 years, because that's when they would actually able to be the emergency unstake would be able to at least get back to principal. So there's that argument that goes out the window. The OA can't dump coins, nor do they own any, because remember, when you stake, the HEX gets burned. You get T-shares back instead. So also the supply, the total supply, the circulating supply thing goes out the window as well. So your metrics for ranking sites and things like that becomes much more realistic with an actual circulating supply by the users. So there's that. There's multiple things. What if Richard may have gotten some bad news? We hate to think about this, but the courts are saying, he owns all of this, or the OA owns all of this. What if there's something along those lines? So again, it's now burned. It's in nobody's hands. There is no HEX. So you start to think about all these different scenarios of what's going on. What was the play? Was it really just to get the inflation down so that people couldn't do rolling stakes? And I honestly think it was more targeted to that.
Right.
However, when that was at first, when I saw the 7-day stakes, I figured it would be a rolling stake to kind of monitor how much of a payout people are getting. Let's cut that down a little bit. And then all of a sudden there's all these 5.555s that came out, and now there is no adjusting. There's really no adjusting that you could do other than to emergency end stake them and burn them forever. Now, I know the goal was to eventually kind of have it play out like Satoshi, right? When Bitcoin first started, Satoshi mined 1 million coins. There was 1 million coins out there that were his. Then it was opened up to everybody else. Eventually, Satoshi's wallet got, evened out with inflation by everybody else. It wasn't as big of a part of a problem later down the road. This was kind of supposed to be a very similar scenario where eventually the OA would kind of be overtaken by everybody else, and it wouldn't hold as much of a supply as it did at the beginning. The problem was probably the half payouts when any kind of penalty. Half of those kept going to the OA. So I don't think it was the model wasn't growing fast enough. Probably not enough new people to absorb the inflation that was happening by these short stakers. So all in all, it's a good thing. It's going to make people either stake now and get what they can, or they're just going to hold it liquid. I mean, those are really the only two options, because that 38% average rate
Right.
has gone away, and I
That's
don't know
out
if
the
they've
window.
I don't know if they've changed that image on the page anymore, but I would hope so, or I hope it gets done soon, because it is kind of false advertisement at this point, and it will be for at least 15 years.
Still says 38 for now. That's a good shout out, though. Yeah, good call.
Yeah, I think that needs to be fixed, and word it a different way, possibly. As the price goes up, those T-shares that you're getting, the 2 or 3 per T-share, it could make people want to get the T-shares now while they can, before these first couple end. Because I can tell you one thing: the share rate is about to jump. It's probably going to go about 5,000 hex per T-share
Hmm.
after this first round of short stakes are ended. So
Yeah.
if you're wanting T-shares, there is no time like the present to try and get them before the rate goes up, or you're going to get a lot less for the same amount.